The lawyer closed the folder before he spoke. "The entire estate," he said, "goes to Margaret Doyle." Silence took the room first. Then Daniel Hensley let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Who is that?" No one answered. Foster Callahan slid a single photograph across the table, a woman in a pale blue uniform, standing beside an old man in a wheelchair, both of them smiling at something outside the frame. Claire Hensley Voss picked it up first. "I have never seen this woman in my life," she said. $62 million. 11 cassette tapes, sealed in a shoebox marked only with a date. And a name neither of Walter Hensley's children recognized. 40 miles away, in a small house outside Savannah, a nurse named Maggie was folding laundry, unaware that her life had already changed. 6 months earlier, Walter Hensley was still a man people crossed the street to greet. He had built Hensley Timber and Trust out of a single sawmill in 1971, and by the time he turned 70, his name sat on 3 buildings in downtown Savannah. People called him self-made, though Walter never liked the phrase. "Nothing is made alone," he used to say. "You just don't always see who helped." His children saw the company. They rarely saw him. Daniel had moved to Charlotte a decade ago to run his own investment firm, one that borrowed heavily against a name he shared but rarely used in conversation. He called his father on birthdays. Sometimes. Claire lived closer, in Atlanta, and visited twice a year, Thanksgiving, and whichever week in spring her schedule allowed. Her calls were shorter, her visits shorter still. Walter never complained. He simply stopped expecting the phone to ring. By his 78th birthday, his heart was failing, and the big house on Ashworth Lane had grown too quiet for one old man to manage alone. His doctor gave him a list of home health agencies. He picked the first name on the page, mostly because he liked how it sounded. That was how Margaret Doyle walked into his life, a home health nurse in her mid-40s, quiet, punctual, unimpressed by the size of the house. She showed up at 7 a.m. sharp on a Tuesday in March, carrying a blood pressure cuff and a thermos of coffee for 2. Though she barely knew the man yet. "You don't have to bring enough for both of us," Walter told her that first morning. "Habit," she said. "My mother always said a kitchen should never smell like it's only feeding one person." He didn't ask about her mother. Not that day. What began as 90-minute visits, 3 times a week, stretched into daily routine within a month. Maggie learned his medications, his stubbornness about taking them, his preference for the porch chair over the recliner inside. She learned, too, that he almost never spoke about his children, and that the silence around their names carried more weight than anything he actually said. Walter, for his part, learned that Maggie carried a weight of her own. A late mother. A father she'd never known. A modest house paid off slowly, on a nurse's income, without help from anyone. Neither of them thought much of these small exchanges at the time. They were simply 2 people filling the hours of long afternoons, one dying slowly, the other paid to notice. Neither knew yet how much those afternoons would come to matter. In Charlotte, Daniel was quietly restructuring a loan he hoped his father would never hear about. In Atlanta, Claire was rehearsing a phone call she kept postponing. And in Savannah, an old man was starting to look forward to Tuesdays for reasons he hadn't yet found the words for. Walter Hensley died on a Sunday in late October. In the porch chair Maggie had wheeled outside for him one last time, watching the light move through the oaks. 9 days later, his children sat across a mahogany table from Foster Callahan, expecting a formality. A signature. A number. They did not expect a stranger's name. "There must be an error," Daniel said, his voice already rising. "We're his children." "There's no error," Callahan replied. "Your father was very specific about the language." Claire reached for the folder before he could stop her. Inside, A single clause underlined in Walter's own hand. To Margaret Doyle, who gave me more attention in 4 years than my own family gave me in 20. The room went cold. Daniel stood so fast his chair scraped against the floor. This is insane. Some nurse manipulated a sick old man, and you're just going to hand her $62 million? Your father was of sound mind, Callahan said. I have the medical documentation. I have the notarized signature. I have 3 witnesses. Then she knew, Claire said quietly. She knew exactly what she was doing. Callahan closed the folder. For what it's worth, she didn't ask a single question about the money when I called her. Not one. Neither Hensley sibling replied to that. By that evening, Daniel had already hired a private investigator. By morning, he had a name, an address outside Savannah, and a modest 2-bedroom house with a paid-off mortgage. Hardly the profile of a woman running a scheme. Still, he wanted answers. He wanted a reason his father's fortune belonged to a woman he had met exactly once, briefly, 3 years earlier, in a hospital hallway he barely remembered. The investigator's report was thin. Margaret Doyle, 46. Licensed home health nurse for 19 years. No criminal record. No debts beyond the ordinary. A late mother, Eleanor Doyle, who had raised her alone in a town 2 hours north of Savannah. One line in the report stopped Daniel cold. Father. Unlisted. He read it twice, then set it aside, telling himself it meant nothing. What Daniel didn't know, what he had no reason yet to suspect, was that the restructured loan in Charlotte had come due 2 weeks earlier than he'd told anyone. His firm was 6 days from missing a payment that would trigger a much larger collapse. $62 million was no longer an insult to him. It was oxygen. Maggie, for her part, hadn't asked for any of it. When Callahan called to inform her of the will, she sat down on her kitchen floor and didn't get up for nearly 20 minutes. I only did my job, she told him. I didn't do anything special. Mr. Hensley didn't see it that way, Callahan said. He left something else for you. 11 cassette tapes, recorded over the last 4 months of his life. His instructions were specific. They're not to be opened by anyone but you. And they're to be played in order. One at a time. Maggie stared at the shoebox on her kitchen table for a long moment before she spoke again. Did he say why? No, Callahan admitted. Only that tape 7 explains everything. His words, not mine. Across town, Daniel was already drafting a legal challenge. Undue influence, his lawyer called it, a claim that could freeze the estate for years if a judge agreed to hear it. He had no idea a shoebox of cassette tapes existed. He had even less idea what was recorded on the 7th one. Within 2 weeks, Daniel's legal challenge made the local paper. Within 3, a reporter from Atlanta picked it up, and Maggie's name appeared in print for the first time in her life, beside the phrase, alleged manipulation of a vulnerable elderly man. She stopped answering her door. Patients canceled appointments. Her supervisor at the agency called her into an office and, without quite saying it outright, suggested she take a leave of absence until things settled down. Maggie sat in her car afterward and cried for the first time since the funeral. She hadn't touched the shoebox in 9 days. Twice, she'd considered calling Callahan to say she didn't want any of it, the house, the accounts, the timber company shares. Let the children have it back. Let the headlines stop. Both times, she picked up the phone. Both times, she set it back down without dialing, some instinct telling her the tapes deserved to be heard before she made a decision that couldn't be undone. Daniel, meanwhile, was drowning in a different way. The loan payment had come and gone. His firm was now technically insolvent, a fact he'd hidden from his own wife for 3 days running. Every hour the estate stayed frozen in litigation was an hour closer to losing everything he had built his identity around. He told himself the lawsuit was about justice. He no longer entirely believed it. Claire, watching her brother unravel from a distance, made a decision of her own. She drove to Savannah, unannounced, and knocked on the door of the small house with the paid-off mortgage. Maggie opened it expecting a reporter. She found the daughter of the man she'd cared for standing on her porch instead, arms crossed, eyes red. "I'm not here to yell," Claire said. "I just want to understand." Maggie let her in. She made 2 cups of coffee, out of habit, before remembering there was only one of them there this time. "I don't know why he did it," Maggie admitted. "I've asked myself every night." "There are tapes," Claire said. Callahan told Daniel. 11 of them. Maggie's hand went still around her mug. "I haven't opened them," she said. "I couldn't." Claire studied her for a long moment, the modest kitchen, the framed photo on the counter of a woman who wasn't Maggie, dressed in a style from decades earlier. "Who is that?" Claire asked. "My mother," Maggie said. "She raised me alone. Never told me who my father was. Died still not telling me, actually. Alzheimer's took whatever she was planning to say near the end." Something in Claire's chest went cold, though she couldn't yet name why. She left 20 minutes later, more unsettled than when she'd arrived, and did something she hadn't done in years. She called Daniel, not to fight, but to ask a question that had started forming the moment she saw that photograph. "When was Dad's affair?" she asked. "The one Mom never talked about. Do you remember the year?" Daniel went quiet on the other end of the line. "Why does that matter now?" "Just tell me the year, Daniel." A long pause. 1968, he finally said. "Before he married Mom. Before any of us." "Why are you asking me this?" Claire looked down at her own hands, still smelling faintly of Maggie's coffee. "No reason," she said. "Forget I asked." She hung up before he could press further, and sat alone in her car outside a stranger's house, doing math she desperately hoped would come out wrong. For the first time since the reading of the will, Claire wasn't angry anymore. She was afraid of what she was about to find out. Maggie opened the shoebox on a Thursday night, alone at her kitchen table, the same table where she'd once poured coffee for a man she had no idea was watching her more closely than she realized. She played the tapes in order, exactly as instructed. The first 6 were ordinary. Walter thanking her for small things, describing memories of the timber mill, apologizing, almost in passing, for children who'd grown distant. Warm. Unremarkable. Tape 7 began differently. "Maggie," Walter's voice said, quieter than on the others. "I need to tell you something I should have said out loud months ago when I still had the nerve." A long pause. The tape hissed softly in the silence. "In 1968, before I married, I was engaged to a woman named Eleanor. Eleanor Doyle. I left her. For money, for a bigger opportunity, for reasons that seemed important at the time and feel small now. I didn't know she was pregnant when I left. I told myself for years that I didn't know." Maggie's hand found the edge of the table. "I found out the truth 11 years ago, from an old business partner who recognized your mother's name on hospital paperwork. By then you were already a grown woman, already a nurse, already someone I had no right to walk back into as a father." His voice cracked, just slightly, on the word father. "So I did something smaller instead. I made sure my doctor's office had a list of agencies. I made sure yours was the first name on that list. I paid nothing to arrange it. I only prayed you'd choose it yourself. And you did." Maggie sat perfectly still, the porch outside dark and silent. "Every Tuesday you sat with me, I wanted to tell you who I was. Every Tuesday, I was too much of a coward. I told myself there would be time. There wasn't. This money was never a gift, Maggie. It's 20 years of child support I never paid. It's an apology 46 years late. My other children have my name. You are the one who has my blood and never asked for a cent of it. The tape clicked off. Maggie sat alone in her kitchen for a long time, staring at a stranger's photograph she now understood wasn't a stranger at all. The man in the wheelchair, smiling on the porch, was her father. She didn't sleep that night. She sat with the last 4 tapes unplayed, the shoebox lid beside her, and let herself grieve a father she had cared for without ever once being allowed to call him that. By morning, she had made 2 decisions. The first was to keep every tape, unopened by anyone else, exactly as Walter had asked. The second was harder. She picked up the phone and dialed a number she'd saved from a missed call days earlier. Foster Callahan answered on the second ring. "I want to split it," Maggie told him. "Not because I have to. Because he would have wanted his children, all 3 of us, to actually know each other, and money never once did that on its own." Callahan was quiet for a moment. "Your father left specific instructions against that, Ms. Doyle. He was very firm the estate go to you, and only you. Then I'll decide what happens with it once it's mine," Maggie said. "That was always my choice to make. Wasn't it?" 3 days later, she called Claire. Not to fight. Not to prove anything. Just to say 4 words she'd been turning over since Thursday night. "I think we're sisters." Daniel dropped the lawsuit 6 weeks later. Not out of grace, out of exhaustion, and a settlement. He has not spoken to Maggie since. Claire has. The sisters meet for coffee most Sundays now, in a small kitchen outside Savannah, where a photograph of Eleanor Doyle sits beside one of a man in a wheelchair, both finally in the same room. Some legacies aren't measured in dollars. They're measured in who finally gets to sit at the same table. But the shoebox isn't empty. Maggie kept 4 tapes unopened. When Claire asks what's on them, Maggie only says one thing. Some truths you have to earn the right to hear. Walter Hensley's story didn't end on tape 7. It just went quiet for a while.